we go. It's time for the Peacock and Williamson Week 5 mailbag. Is Sam Darnold playing his way into being the long-term starter for the Minnesota Vikings? And what the heck are the Miami Dolphins doing at quarterback? All that and more coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. That's where most of the questions have come from on the socials for today's mailbag episode. You can always drop a question in the YouTube comments. Make sure you subscribe while you're there. Appreciate all the everydayers who already are. And if you're new to the program, appreciate you jumping in. And subscribe on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this podcast. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code, all lowercase, LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Okay, let's start with Sam Darnold. We heaped a lot of praise on the Vikings and Sam Darnold yesterday when we made our four-pack this week of picks, and we picked the Vikings to win in London over the New York Jets. And Sam Darnold is playing phenomenal and, in the conversation for potentially league MVP through the first quarter of the season, Matt. But the Minnesota Vikings, and he's hurt, so they don't have to worry about their plan at quarterback this year. But they drafted JJ McCarthy in the first round to be the quarterback of the future. And if Darnold continues to play this well, and this question, by the way, from Michael on Twitter, if Darnold keeps playing like this, the Vikings have to keep him as the starter next year, right? Also, what's the deal with Christian McCaffrey, BP? My fantasy team is sinking fast. Give me some good news. On Christian McCaffrey, can't give you good news there. He got some treatment in Germany because his Achilles isn't healing fast enough. And now we're hearing that it was bilateral, which means he's got some pain in both Achilles that he's dealt with. One, it's worse than the other right now. But that's not good news. And we talked a lot about the Madden curse. It's not a Madden curse. It's a running back who carried the ball 400 times the year before curse is what the Madden curse is. That's what happens with running backs. That's why we talk about the running back value, paying for them, trading a lot for running backs. You have a great one. It's like, oh, yeah, you want to use him less because he's so great. Week 9 bye. I wouldn't expect to see Christian McCaffrey. Maybe you get him back earlier than that, week 10 and beyond, maybe. And so, hey, maybe he can be a league winner. Go trade for him, maybe, if you can get him for peanuts in your fantasy league. But he might not help you in the near future there.
I'm sure they're thinking postseason with him too. Like they're thinking big picture. Right.
January is more important than October for the 49ers, the way they're thinking. But, still got to make the playoffs. But running the ball has never been a problem for Kyle Shanahan anyway. And Jordan Mason's the number 2 rusher in the league right now. So the 49ers are okay. Your fantasy league might not be.
Yep. What a bummer, though, if you take him first overall. But anyway, as most people did. Darnold. First off, he only signed a 1-year deal. So he might say, I want to hit the open market and have 5 teams compete for me. That's possible.
If Darnold plays so well that the Vikings would consider keeping him around long-term as the starter instead of JJ McCarthy, then that tells you how much money he can make on the open market, which makes it even more difficult for the Vikings to hold on to him.
Which also makes me think maybe you franchise him.
That's a lot of money. Yeah. So if he sticks around, it's probably on the franchise tag, because are they going to give him a 4-year, $200 million contract? You know what I mean? Like, that's what we're talking about. If he keeps playing like this, someone's going to drop some big money on him. Yeah. And there's probably too many quarterbacks
pedigree
around the NFL. And you just drafted a guy, but you would pay a first round price to have what Darnold is doing if it was just the guy you drafted. So it makes the decision really difficult, because you're going to change your entire plan. And at that point, you just drafted a first-round guy to be a backup for you long-term. Right now, I still can't see him signing a long-term deal in Minnesota. They probably got to stick to their original plan, but it's possible they get worse at quarterback too.
So again, if he's this good, that's subject to change, of course, or 90% of it. He doesn't have to be the top 5 quarterback to have this conversation. I think you're the Vikes. You don't let him walk. Like, he does not hit free agency. Like, I am putting the franchise tag on you, and we can continue to talk from that point. And if someone calls about McCarthy, I'll listen. I don't think you walk away from a franchise quarterback. If Darnold's a franchise quarterback, you might be able to flip McCarthy for a first, or I'm sure there's plenty of teams that like him. Or last note is, if you just franchise him and he plays 1 year, okay, McCarthy needed to sit anyway. I know that would be year 3 before he's in the mix, but Darnold could get hurt. He's year 2 next year,
There's nothing wrong with sitting a guy for a couple of years, and we've seen it work in multiple locations, Green Bay a bunch of times. Darnold, I don't think at this point would be okay with that. I think you would get in a real bind if you tried to make Darnold play on a franchise tag when he's a guy that thinks he should be able to cash in and get a long-term deal to be a starter somewhere. And it would also tell you that the Vikings aren't giving him that money and that assurance that he's their starting quarterback either. So that would be a holdout and pretty ugly for the Vikings too. So this gets very dicey for the Minnesota Vikings. And it's good that he's playing this well.
Good problem.
The better he plays, it is a problem, and it gets a little weird. And I still think what ends up happening is Darnold signs a big contract somewhere else, and the Vikings have.
If I was in charge of that team, I would never just say it's okay for you to walk and we're getting no compensation for you. No chance.
Let's take it down that road. It's February. Vikings were a playoff team. They're really good. They didn't win the Super Bowl with Sam Darnold or anything, but he was, he's playing like he plays like this all year long. What do you trade? What do you accept in trade offers for JJ McCarthy at that point?
It's not a Fields or Lance situation. I'm coming to the table wanting a first.
You want a first back. You want and then you'd be like, okay, well, look, we ended up getting a quarterback that we like, and we got our first round pick back. Maybe it's later than the one we spent, but that's okay. We got this done. We found a quarterback. I don't think a team gives you a first though.
Maybe you trade him for Pat Surtain. That's a bad example because they just drafted one. Maybe trade him for Sauce Gardner when Rodgers retires. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. So you think the most likely scenario, if Darnold balls out the rest of the year, is that they trade JJ McCarthy?
But there would be no rush for that. That could happen this time next year. You know what I mean?
So it would be, but you would have to in my opinion, I think I don't know that a franchise tag would play. I think a franchise tag would play only if a trade also happens like before draft day.
That's probably a good point. Like, there's no way I'm trading McCarthy with Darnold on the franchise tag, not thinking I can get a long-term deal done with him.
Yes. Or you just get a pick for Darnold in that case. And that makes you feel better about going with the other quarterback instead that you still don't know quite enough about.
But it'd have to be better than a third because I know I'm getting a third back for him.
But here's the thing is then you completely hamstring yourself with the McCarthy thing. And maybe that's okay if you sign Darnold so if the Vikings sign Darnold to a long-term deal, well, that's done. JJ McCarthy's a backup quarterback now.
He's a backup quarterback, right?
Period. So you're not going to get very good offers for them then, and it's just going to get less and less.
But he's not a crazy expensive backup quarterback. He could Jordan Love it for a while,
Are you okay with that? If you're the Vikings, where it's like, look, it's kind of like where the Falcons are right now. To be honest,
we're probably going to need him anyway.
We have a first round quarterback who's a backup, and he might stay a backup.
Yeah, and sometime his opportunity is going to present itself. These quarterbacks just get banged up.
That's really interesting. And in the past, teams don't. You have to have some guts to do that. To be like, well, you almost. It's not even admitting defeat. It's just like, well, we lit that first round pick on fire. Okay.
But I'm not just dumping them for Fields or Lance trade. McCarthy's not less valuable now.
Would you rather have a backup quarterback or a second round pick becomes the question.
Probably the backup quarterback.
Interesting. Okay.
Because you might really be happy about it in 3 years. Like if you sign Darnold to a 3-year deal, and McCarthy Jordan loves it that whole time. And then it's his turn.
It depends on what the deal is for Darnold. Does it become is it like a Daniel Jones deal where you get out of it in a couple of years and then now we've got JJ McCarthy instead. So you just have that baton pass just happens a year or two later than you expected.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the way I'm looking at it. Or at that point, we already paid Darnold signing bonus. The Jets give you, the Jets a bad example because he was there. The Steelers give you a first-round pick for Darnold, or you know what I mean?
But your point that
I'm not just letting them walk.
NFL teams do not just give away what they perceive as a franchise quarterback. And Darnold's fairly young still, too, by the way. This is
right,
like a 5-year-old veteran.
No, he could be a 5 to 8 year starter for the Vikings.
Yeah.
That's possible.
Can be interesting. One big hurdle, Darnold has to keep it up.
Yeah.
So we'll see. It's going to be fun. Vikings, man. I'm a believer. I'm a believer in what I've seen so far. And Sam Darnold's always been physically talented, and he's playing some good football right now. And he's been well coached the last couple of years, which I think is huge for him. And he's got a true number one, which is always nice too.
I meant to call you out on this yesterday, though. You said you're a Vikings believer, but then you compared him to Mickey Morandini, I think, yesterday. Which I thought was a little bit of I'm not a baseball guy. Maybe Mickey Morandini's a pretty good player, but they're more of a I'm not sure they're Ryan Sandberg going back to my era, but
right. Yeah. Not Joe Morgan at second base. Trying to think of power hitting second baseman. There's not a lot of them.
No.
But again, that's what I'm saying. It's still a small sample. It's been 4 games. We've seen other quarterbacks play well for 4 games. Other teams play well for 4 games. I love what I've seen from the Vikings, and I think that they're going to be pretty good the rest of the way. There's no reason for me to believe they won't play pretty well. Are they going to play? I don't think they're going to go 20-0 and win the Super Bowl. And Sam Darnold is the next Tom Brady either. So that's kind of what I'm saying.
No matter what, that gets interesting. I mean, like Darnold's done enough that unless he's like turns into the worst quarterback on the planet, but even if he's 80%, 75% of the guy we've seen thus far, tag and trade. I mean, he still has. I mean, you know what I mean. He's valuable no matter what.
Well, here's the thing. So let's trade out Sam Darnold for Baker Mayfield.
Yeah.
You're in February now. Do you let Baker Mayfield walk and go with JJ McCarthy? I'd probably go the JJ McCarthy route. Probably. So Darnold has to be even better than that, I think.
Right.
Oh my God, okay, we're going to go away from this first round pick. He's a backup now. We're going to sign Darnold long term. Because Darnold would still get, as Baker would, a long-term deal from somebody, a semi-long-term deal at least.
Oh, there'll be teams calling, no doubt.
$500 million contract, but decent money, like good money to be a starter for a multi-year contract.
It's going to be an interesting decision no matter what. I mean, there's a couple of those teams. The Steelers come to mind too. Like, I mean, what if Wilson never plays all year and Fields is good? And, what do those guys value, All
right, we'll find out. Is Sam Darnold a Hall of Fame power hitting second baseman, or is he a slap hitter? Is he a slap hitter? All right, next we got a lot more in the Peacock and Williamson Week 5 mailbag. What the heck are the Miami Dolphins doing? They've got decisions to make now, not even in the future at quarterback, and they're doing nothing. And Nick Sirianni, hot seat, all that and more coming up on the rest of this episode of Peacock and Williamson. Oh, it's always fun to get those tickets, those hot, fresh tickets for the next NFL game you're going to attend, the next concert you're going to attend. Maybe you want to go see a comedy show, maybe a night out, go to a theater event. You can find all those tickets on the Game Time app. And Game Time now has a new feature for you called Game Time Picks. It makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. And if you're trying to find a great deal on maybe some last-minute tickets for this week's NFL slate of games, you're going to go see your favorite team go play a game. You're like, you know what? I'm going to go to the game. Let's go see what's on Game Time. Well, you don't have to go through 50,000 tickets, right? To find the one, use Game Time Picks, and it allows you to find the right deal for you to go get those NFL seats or comedy seats or concert seats or whatever it is near you at Game Time. And did I mention the great deals you can find on last-minute tickets at Game Time? Toggle on the all-in pricing features so you don't see the surprising fees at checkout. You get the panoramic views from your seat and so much more. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. All right, we spent a lot of time on Sam Darnold. Real quick note here, this is sent from Tom. He said, I think you guys are going to have to mention positives from the Titans last week and maybe mention how good Devondre Sweat looks. And he also says, I understand why you bashed the pick at the time. Also, finally, the Titans breaking 30 points for the first time in 38 games.
I'm glad he said that. And first of all, I did the power ranks and I put Miami last, and that's who they beat. So, okay. But I've also seen power ranks a week ago that had Tennessee last, which I thought was unfair. Mostly because I think they have a good defense. I mean, no matter how you slice it, I think that's a good defense. And I'm glad he brought up Sweat, because he did not look like a second-round pick to me at his weight. But he is playing like a first-round pick, and he was awesome against Miami, by the way. Let's see if he can do it for 17 games,
There was stuff with him as a prospect beyond the tape too, and it was going up with like a certain weight, and it was like there's questions about him beyond like, can he plug the middle of the field? And he's shown up and shown he's able to plug the middle of the field. So as far as the talent and what they thought they were getting in a big 350, 70, plus, 90, I don't know how many pound defensive tackle, he's been that for the Titans. So as far as like the tape and the talent, the player, the Titans have hit on that, and I wouldn't have touched him there, but man, ask the Dallas Cowboys if they would like someone like Tavondre Sweat in the middle of their defense and the run, and it makes a lot of other things able. We're kind of getting away from the era of the nose tackle, and I'm looking at some teams out there. It's like, man, you could use one big old guy in the middle right now.
Mm-hmm. But a team like Miami could use one big guy in the middle right now too. Right. But he's been very good. I'm not sure that I think the Titans are better than bad. You know what I mean? Like if there's whoever the bottom tier is of the league, the Panthers, the Patriots, the Dolphins, the Jags, I'm going to have really low in the power ranks. Titans are right above them.
I don't want to go too heavy. They did play a team that you said is 32 in the rankings. It's the first time in 38 games that they've scored 30 points. So
that's not exactly
still bad, but maybe not the worst version of bad. Like they're 29 instead of 32 in my power rankings.
Okay. Like I think they're like the Giants and them are bad, but not the bottom tier.
All right. We talked a lot about a team that things are going pretty well at quarterback, despite one of them missing the season with an injury, missing his rookie season in Minnesota. What are the Miami Dolphins doing right now? Sir Madradissimo says, says, can you explain to me why Miami wouldn't throw a 7th round pick or so to get someone like Jimmy G, who knows their system, opposed to what they have rolled out at QB, and not even changing the system to suit Skyler or Huntley? Is that on the head coach or the GM?
I don't really know how to answer it, but I like the question, and I think you brought up Jimmy G's name the day after Tua was concussed.
I don't know how Garoppolo wasn't a Miami Dolphin before the start of Week 3 after his 2 games.
Right. Yeah, and I can't condone just doing what they're doing and hoping that he's okay. I mean, even if they think he's going to be back Week 8, I think it is. Much of the season is going to be lost, and I think Jimmy maybe you beat the Titans with Jimmy.
So, and here's the other thing: are we going to pretend that that this time Tua's never going to have another concussion the rest of his life?
Right.
And he comes back in Week 8 too, so he might come back. You're awesome for 2 games, and then he's out again.
Not that he's great, but at least last offseason, they gave Mike White decent money. Remember, like I think they need to pay their backup quarterback like a starter. I mean, like $8 million type of guy, Yeah,
and I think their cap situation isn't great. Maybe that's part of it. Are the Rams trying to hold their hand over the fire and be like, no, we want a 5th round pick? They're like, no way. We'll give you a future 6th at best. Maybe that's what's going on behind the scenes. Is it worth it? You just say, okay, come on, let's get this done. Let's get ourselves at least a quarterback. And maybe, Mike McDaniels maybe is like, hey, you know what? Actually, Jimmy's kind of garbage. So I don't really want Jimmy.
That's possible too. He's come on, pillar of durability
better than what you've ran out there. And again, who's the GM? Chris Greer, right?
Yeah.
Hey, Chris Greer. Hey, Mike McDaniel. You just hit 32 on Matt Williamson's power rankings list. Do something. Do something.
Yeah, I mean, the season's going to be lost here before you know it.
So, but I don't have an answer for the question. Like, who's to blame?
No, right. I think we all agree.
Head coach, blame them both. Why haven't they done it? I have no idea. They had to do something, Miami. What are you doing? You're just going to let your season sink into the abyss?
Couldn't you convince Tannehill to come off the couch? Or I don't know. I mean, there's got to be 4 or 5 names that are along those lines that you could have got.
Next, is Nick Sirianni, Philadelphia Eagles head coach, on the hot seat? And more from the Peacock and Williamson Week 5 mailbag. The final segment of this mailbag episode is sponsored by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And NFL fans, right now, you can start your FanDuel experience with a huge return the rest of this season by getting $200 extra in bonus bets guaranteed. And all you got to do is place your first $5 bet at FanDuel. And again, you don't have to win that first $5 bet. All you got to do is place your first $5 bet at FanDuel. And right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets to play around with, to bet on weekly lines, who's going to win the next Super Bowl, Rookie of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, not just NFL bets, college football, every sport. You can find all that action at FanDuel.com. And by the way, when you're sitting there on your couch next Sunday, you're like, in the middle of the game, I'm going to go check the latest stats and go view some play-by-play. You can find so much more, all of that on the same page where you're placing your bets at FanDuel.com. So download the app or go to FanDuel.com. Get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com. Nick Sirianni, what's going on with the Philadelphia Eagles? And Joey Bag of Donuts, frequent mailbagger, says, is Nick Sirianni on the hot seat? The Eagles have too much talent to be losing so much. And I will add one more thing to the Nick Sirianni conversation. Nick Sirianni is not a play caller on offense or defense. He's supposed to be the vibes guy. And if anything, the vibes are failing above all else with the Philadelphia Eagles. They're not a confident football team right now.
And wow, talk about bad vibes. The second half of last year was a disaster. And the playoff embarrassment against the Bucs was a disaster. So I think, yes, couple things. Often when you change both coordinators, there's a conversation between head coach and owner that goes something like this. Like, hey, head coach, I'm not happy with how things went. We are going to make changes. You can all go, or you can make changes on both sides of the ball. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All right, I'll fire my buddies. I mean, basically, that's kind of how that goes. But that means your seat is hot even then. You know, like it's crossed the owner's mind, probably. You know what I'm saying?
And so, we failed again on offense and defense. Oh, well, let's get two new coordinators on offense and defense again then.
No, right. Like they're not going to let you pull two more out. You know, they're just going to clean house and go from there. So I find it kind of interesting, and this is sort of a side note, but on Locked On Dynasty on Wednesday, we had a question about Jaden Daniels. You know, where would Daniels be on your Dynasty quarterback list? And I said second behind Josh Allen. And part of it's because some of the hot quarterbacks, Mahomes and Hurts in particular, that's where I'm going here, their stock has gotten worse, you know, and I just watching Hurts is like, are they happy with the contract? It could, and Marcus even threw something out there like next draft, whenever they trade up and with the 34th pick early in the second round, they take another quarterback. Doesn't it kind of feel like Wentz and Hurts was that guy? Like, could something like that be on the horizon for one of the most aggressive organizations in the league? And that would be a coaching change too, probably.
They weren't afraid to fire a Super Bowl winning head coach last time either. And
right.
Sirianni has fallen short of that lofty goal as well. So yeah, I think
they'll make changes. Yeah,
I think Sirianni's absolutely on the hot seat right now. But
probably top 5 warmest seats.
I would say he does have a great roster on paper to start the yeer, but they have missed AJ Brown and Devontae Smith at times this year.
And Lane Johnson last game. I mean,
there is other reasons. No, so it's not like he's going to get fired tomorrow, even if they have a stinker of a game. But I think, you know, if
they don't make playoffs,
like we're talking about a lot of what ifs, if what we've seen for 4 weeks continue, if this team doesn't make the playoffs and they win, 7-8 games or something like that, I could absolutely see him getting fired. And I think he is on the hot seat in that regard. And like we're talking about Sam Darnold being great and the Vikings being awesome the rest of the year. So there's still some what ifs with all of this, but if things continue the way they are, then Sam Darnold makes a lot of money and Nick Sirianni might get fired.
Like, I think we might see an interim head coach in Jacksonville this year. I don't think that's going to happen in Philly. Like, he's safe for the year, but if he doesn't make the playoffs, I'd be very worried. And I was almost going to say if he doesn't win the division, I'd be worried, but we'll see. I mean,
Link Hogthrob on Twitter says, what is the natural response to the NFL systematically allowing blatant holding on the edge rushers, reallocating money to the middle of the defensive line, having the edge rushers start to play dirtier when held, like hands to the face and other things, moving edge rushers around the line, what's going on? And is this a officiating problem? Is this a technique problem? What do you think about this? And, a lot of fans bring up a lot of stuff about officiating pretty much every week. But what I've found strange with the way that the league is being officiated this year, specifically with holding, is I've seen more holding calls on like tight ends and wide receivers on DBs down the field than ever. And yet they're letting edge rushers get grabbed as much as ever. And so that doesn't jive with me. I don't understand what's going on and what the emphasis even is for the officials this year.
So we talk about this a fair amount on our Steelers show because I think it affects them as much as anyone because their defensive front is so good and Watt gets held a lot. Let me tell you that. I mean, I'm sure Bosa does. I'm sure. I mean, all of them, sure they do. But there's some blatant holds that just aren't called. And what I think is happening, and I think Link's on top of this, is there's too many flags in the league, and many of them you have to call. I mean, when somebody offensive procedure, or like we don't need to call every illegal man downfield, but we do need to call every time the offense can't align right, or somebody jumps, or things pre-snap stuff. And with so many young quarterbacks, I think you're getting more of that than ever. They're just not aligning everyone as well. So I'm sure they're saying, man, we're throwing so many flags this year. Where can we cut back? Holding, because we also want more scoring.
Yeah, we want big plays. And I would say that if you had to point, like, so I would say Andy Reid is awesome at this. Playing to because each officiating crew is different too.
Big time.
Like some games you'll notice like, why is there so many flags? It's like, we didn't come here to watch you, zebras, and some crews throw more flags. Some crews let holding go more. And I think the Kansas City Chiefs is one of those teams, and they get blamed a lot for like, oh man, the refs really side with the Chiefs and they're getting all. I think they're really good at like, hey, this crew doesn't call holding, so hold.
To hold like
right. It's 49ers
DPI
fans
is another one.
Yeah. 49ers fans
throw teams.
Nick Bosa gets hold like crazy, especially in the Super Bowl against the Kansas City Chiefs, and it doesn't get called, and they get so mad about it. But like it's if they're not going to call it, and you kind of know they're not going to call it before, and especially big games, big situations, you see sometimes where it's like the defense coordinator is clear, like, hey, everybody hold everybody, like the DBs. Interfere with the guy, hold him. It's not, they're not going to call it right now on this play in this moment kind of thing. So I think some of it's smart coaching when they do it, what teams do it. But it is frustrating because I think it's hard to officiate. And I don't even blame the officials that much because they're being asked to do too much. Yeah. And in the end, I would like less flags. So does that mean you allow the guys to hold a little bit more? Yeah. Okay. But it still doesn't
last year
what is getting called and what isn't and how often. It's kind of a mess.
The last year that scoring was really up, because every year since the COVID years, what I'm talking about, when there was no one in the stands, scoring's gone down every year. Well, that year that there was no one in the stands, holding was legal. I mean, it was legal. There was so many fewer holding penalties than any other season, but scoring was super high, and that's what they want. And the fantasy people and betting overs and, so that's why we bring up the Steelers a lot. It's like the strength of their team is the defensive front. That hurts those teams more than others. You know what I mean? When you're built around the defensive front first and foremost, that's going to hurt you.
And then the way players are coached too. I think some coaches and some players do a bad job of where their hands are placed, and then some defensive players do a better job of like spinning out of it to make it obvious that they are being held. And I think some coaches do a really good job of coaching players to hold in a way that it's not going to get called versus other coaches. And so there's a lot of that goes on, and it's nuanced between teams. And so usually if it feels like it's hitting your team a lot, it's probably a coaching or officiating crew problem as much as anything.
And you're 100% right about the crews. And Warren Sharp does a real good job of this. And it's obviously has massive betting implications, or overs and unders, and it can level the playing field. But also in his guide, that offseason guide that he puts out, it broke down every team. Like, for example, I think the Ravens defense drew the most penalties, which made a lot of sense because they confused people and they had a really good defense. Like the offenses committed a lot of penalties against the Ravens defense. Well, that adds up, you know?
Yeah. And you mentioned the procedural penalties too. And I'm seeing more of that. And I think the league was maybe
have to throw those
in on it, like, because and so many teams do so much motions now. And sometimes you have
that too.
3 players motioning on a play. And it's like, oh, you get a lot of those penalties. And again, every year, more penalties get added and hardly any ever get taken away. And so if you want less penalties, you got to start taking something away. And I think it's like, unless it's blatant, don't call holding, which is why it's weird that I'm seeing so many holding penalties be called down the field on like wide receivers and stuff.
Yeah, like maybe those could go away, or a legal man downfield that's one step further downfield.
Yeah. You got to get pretty far down the field before I'm throwing that flag. Thanks to all the questions for everybody. Apologies to the ones we did not get to. Always get so many great ones every week. Keep them coming for week 6. Mailbag at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Drop a question in the YouTube comments. Subscribe while you're there. Matt and I back Friday to make picks for the rest of week 5 right here. Peacock and Williams.